Om Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha Akanda Rupastite Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shurtayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Indram Mitram Varunamagni Matrato Divyaha Saparno Garutman Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti Agnim Yaman Matarish Vanamahu. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. To that singular divine presence, the seers assign many a title, such as the Lord of the Gods, the eternal friend of all beings, the all-purifying waters of existence, the revelatory fire of yoga, the all-pervasive air of spirituality, the devourer of death, the winged carrier of consciousness, and the one who shines forth the light. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may Brahman sustain us, may Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. We welcome you to the SRV ashram here on the big island of Hawaii. After a 5 or 6 week absence from live streaming, because we were, that is in Hawaii, because we were in Portland, Oregon at our ashram there, and in San Francisco at the Healing Center ashram, and giving classes on the Adhyatma Ramayana, which is, the Adhyatma Upanishad. It's a habit because I studied the Ramayana for so long. The Adhyatma Upanishad, because it's been a very popular series. In fact, we've gotten a lot of people viewing it, more than any other series so far, and it's the newest. So maybe that's an indication that more people are tuning in to the Dharma, particularly India's Sanatana Dharma, which is the name of this class series, some 4 or 5 classes we will partake of in the atmosphere of universal lifestyle. I just chanted so many things about that one presence, the fire of yoga and the winged carrier of consciousness like Garuda, and the one who shines forth the light. Those might as well be appellations for Mother India, who's beyond religion, really. When we assign a title like spirituality, then we do so after measuring the merit of the subject. That is, Mother India as a subcontinent, as a nation, has been there for so long could be even the cradle of civilization. And the recent excavations that are going on in the Indus River Valley. But we know India takes a rather long view of that there are no beginnings, middles, and ends to time. They're just constant cycles rolling on, and therefore measuring things inside of a certain cycle of time is a bit futile when everything is eternal. That is, Brahman is eternal, Ishvara, like a huge iceberg that never melts, Sri Ramakrishna said, when everything else melts at the end of Pralaya, Mahapralaya, is eternal. Nature is eternal because it just goes back to seeds when it loses its form. In fact, if you look at a bunch of seeds, it's really trying to tell you that. And not just physical seeds, but there are mental seeds, ideological seeds, conceptual seeds that are back in the great mind of God. And everything simply just returns to those. So wherever you look, all you see is eternal. It reminds us of Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnamadachute, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. That is, that everything is infinite, everything is eternal. Or if you want to interpret that word full, everything is constantly full. And when you have dualities like emptiness and fullness, or presence and non-presence, or chit and achit, that is, consciousness and unconsciousness, then you have to assign those things to the dual mind or to relativity. And the advantage of that is that you can place your mind then on what is eternal. And the eternal among non-eternal things, because inside of these cycles of time, there are not only objects and worlds that are being drug in and out of existence, manifested and unmanifested, but beings are also being dragged from birth to death and death to birth. It's actually a quote from Swami Vivekananda's Song of the Sannyasin. This thirst for life forever quench, it drags from birth to death and death to birth the soul. He conquers all who conquers self. Know this and never yield. It's the full verse. So that is, never yield to this weakness or to this fear of death. And just know that you and everything else are eternal. And then get off the wheel of the cycling, non-eternal, and make sure that you concentrate. If thine eye be single, concentrate with that third eye upon the Supreme Being, which is Brahman, or Allah, or Almighty Father, however you call it or think of it in your particular tradition. Those traditions we find are all in agreement about certain absolute truths. When you take a saying like Sanatana Dharma, although we have to be rather careful of it in present times because there are people in India, some cults and so forth, who call themselves Sanatanis, and they were not as universal as they made themselves out to be. They started calling their own sect superior to others. So we have to be very careful with the term, but if you look at the original Sanskrit, Sanatana simply means eternal, and Dharma means this. It's a hard word to interpret or define, but basically sometimes they say righteousness, but that tends to fall too much into the moral, immoral kind of level of things. We'd call it more like a divine lifestyle that we live, like a yogic lifestyle. We have to live in the Dharma in order to realize the non-dual truth. So when you come into a setting like this in the SRV associations, which you do often if you're a part of that following, and if you look into these classes, which are live streamed and which turn into YouTube videos eventually when they're edited and placed, then you'll find out that this Dharma is a very important subject. It's very crucial to spiritual life. And when we say, again, spiritual, we mean something that is transcendent of morality and immorality, and even transcendent of knowledge and ignorance. It's beyond all dualities. It's something of the very nature of liberation itself, as Shankara says, moksha or mukti. And so it speaks to the eternal nature of everything, but particularly to the eternal nature of Brahman. Sanatana Dharma then would be a vast subject in India, because India, they call her the mother of all religions, but they also speak in terms of all these different ages that have gone by, millennia have rolled by, and you've had such darshanas as yoga and Vedanta and Samkhya and Tantra, and then you've had such, in the Tantra itself, for instance, you've had these followings like lineages like Shaktism and Shaivism and Vaishnavism and Ganapachyam, Saurism, worship of the sun. You've had so many different looks at divine reality, so many different windows from that mansion of India's Sanatana Dharma. And so it really beggars description, and it transcends the mind to try and put it into words. There's a beautiful Sanskrit sloka that states that from which speech and mind recoil, both unable to fathom or understand it, the one who knows the bliss of that Brahman escapes fear for all time. And so it is. Om, peace, peace, peace. So this fear of death, or this fear of the non-eternal, if you want to put it that way, is completely done away with in India's way of thinking, especially when one courts Sanatana Dharma. Now, I've placed here a chart that's actually entitled the name of our series, India's Sanatana Dharma. But before I take that up, let me read you the description of universality that is at the top of this other chart. That is, we've shown many of these charts before, and I have some 250 of them now that I've created that are being put in a book with commentaries called Footfall of the Indian Rishis. So it shows these footfalls through these ages of these different illumined souls who have come and taught at different times this eternal Dharma, the basic precepts of which never changed. There were certain, I'll show you a chart on that too soon, the 5 essential facts of this Indian Dharma. What changed was the need to present it to people of different climes and different times, different cultures, different areas, sometimes even different languages, but always based in that ancient original Deva Bhashya. Deva Bhashya means Sanskrit, or the language of the gods. That language in which many, many saints and seers got illumined. So that language is particularly profound. It's one and the same with the Sanatana Dharma. You can hardly separate the two. You have to look at the Sanskrit and the words and the meaning of the words, and then meditate upon the words and contemplate the words and get the outer meaning and the inner, deeper meaning both before you would understand how precious words are. And of course they're going to be helpful in explaining and in philosophy, and also in contemplation if one takes up sadhana or spiritual practice, which is a rather rare thing nowadays. Not a lot of people are doing spiritual practice, particularly in the West. But Holy Mother, Shisharda Devi, whose picture is beautifully displayed here, and who's also on our altar, and who's the Ishta Devi of this particular ashrama, SRV associations, the teacher of my teacher, has often complained about the fact that people got the mantra and people got the teachings from the guru, but then they didn't do anything with them. So she would say that they would complain all the time about their life and all the troubles they were having. And at the same time, then would come and complain to her, and she would say, well, you remember the mantra I gave you? Have you practiced it? And they've said, no, I haven't. Well, you have to repeat it every day, twice a day at dawn and dusk. The two times of when light turns to dark and dark turns to lightness are the most auspicious times to sit and meditate and do your mantra. The conjunction of day and night. Conjunctions are very important in Sanatana Dharma. The bringing together of certain factions and meditating upon them. You could call that just being aware of them. Swami Krishna even used to say that. When darkness comes and daytime fades away, people all of a sudden realize that there are things not under their control. Usually they go through the day thinking everything's under my control. My life is under my control, and it's basically when they say under my control, they mean the ego's control. They never sacrifice their ego and say everything is under the control of the Divine Mother of the Universe, for instance. She controls everything. But when night turns to day, they have a chance to think about the fact that that happened without their decree, and happened by the cosmic powers that were functioning under her auspice. See? So now they get to divest themselves of their ego. See? And then they can do the mantra in that egoless state and make swift and certain spiritual progress. So spirituality is based on that. Religion is just a matter of obedience, you see, quite often, and observance. But spirituality is based on sadhana, spiritual practice. If you want to be spiritual and not just religious, then you have to engage in some practice. And that practice you get from a guru. If it's a guru as authentic one, then will tell you how to repeat the mantra and how to meditate, to study the scriptures of the Dharma, so that these teachings can fuel your meditations, see, and inspire you. Holy Mother used to say, I initiated you because you were a noble soul. And she'd also say, all of you are gods and goddesses, don't you realize that? Which is what Swami Vivekananda told us when he came west in 1893 to America. He said, don't you know that human beings are just God walking around on two legs? Well, they'd known that in India for a long time, and because they'd have practiced that attitude, or mental asana, if you want to call it, then they started seeing the divine in everything, including themselves, and that produced a lot of seers. India, you can't even shake a stick at how many seers and saints and sages and saviors, avatars there are in India, have come out of India. It's amazing when one plunges into it and sees that. And they've all left this footfalls I'm talking about. They've all left this sort of echo of what they taught as the ages went on, and the next one came along and corroborated what the previous one taught, modified just the outer portion of it to fit the people's understanding of that particular day. Because 500 years is 600, 700 years is a long time. You see, 550 years from Lord Buddha to Jesus, and another 700 years from Jesus to Shankara, and then another 700 from Shankara to Chaitanya, and another 400 or 500 years from Chaitanya to Ramakrishna. So you have these periods of time that pass. Well, we can't even think in terms of 100 years, because our lifespan is less than that. In fact, as long as we're repeating Holy Mother's sayings, she often also said, ordinary people usually pass away, and they occupy a subtle body for 100 years, and then they come back. So when they come back, everything's changed, you see, and they've forgotten their previous lifetime, and everything has changed. That is, their families are gone, and their homes are gone, and where they lived were gone. Their memories are probably gone too, unless they're an exceptional soul. She said exceptional souls, they can come back either right away if they choose to, or they can take 500, 700 years to come back. She said that Naren, that is the pre-monastic name of Swami Vivekananda, was Narendra. She said Narendra sits in meditation after death for 700 years at a time, like a wooden statue. So this is a soul that is beyond life and death and birth, you see, and just manifests a body from this eternal space. This eternal space is the eternal Dharma. And this eternal Dharma is full of these teachings of the Dharma. So and it's very difficult to find evidence of it over these periods of 500 years until you have some great master come along like that. Now in this day and age, that is in the 1800s, Sri Ramakrishna was born on earth in the body, and when he lived and grew up in Bengal, he was an exponent of this Sanatana Dharma. He was universally minded by nature, so he practiced all the religions that he could because he loved God so much. He wanted to see God through all these different religious approaches. He was drawn to do that. He was compelled to do that by Mother Kali, Divine Mother of the Universe, who is his Ishtam, his Ishtadevi, the primordial goddess. So she would urge him on to do these things and operated him. He said quite often like he was just a puppet put together with popsicle sticks and strings, you see, and she was just guiding him around the world. So she would throw him into these various practices that he would learn, that is, relearn, as it were, or re-imbibe all the teachings of the Sanatana Dharma and just naturally exude them as he went about his affairs in everyday life for the 50 or so years that he lived on earth. So this was a truly spiritual being. See. I heard our founder, Lex Hickson, here, the SRV Associations. He was the person who kind of brought us all together and helped us form this association under the names of Sharada, Ramakrishna, and Vivekananda, SRV. And I was on the West Coast a couple of weeks ago, and I saw something that he said. He said, someone asked him about his features and his unique way of life and everything. He said, I want you to know that there's nothing unique or special about me whatsoever. Now, if you knew Lex Hickson, it's a kind of a strange statement because this was a fantastic person, just always joyful, always peaceful, always deep, always with his mind on God. So the way I would interpret such a statement, that there was nothing special or unique about him whatsoever, is that that's a natural human being. Everyone should be able to say that there's nothing unique and special about me whatsoever because I'm a devotee of God. If you're a devotee of God, then you are what you're supposed to be, just a natural human being. We need more of those nowadays. And notice also that the ego is absent, like the ego of I'm a learned person or I'm a great soul or whatever. The spiritual ego as well as the professional ego is gone from a statement like that. So that smacks of this understanding of universality, eternal, or Sanatana Dharma. See. So I brought you a few treats today that will help us understand universality because it is so rare to even hear about it. You'll find great souls have been born and they're associated with some sampradaya, some walk of life, some spiritual tradition, some lineage. And great, no doubt, inside of each their own lineage, but very rare to have a person come and evince the universality of all religions, practice them, and then prove them. So that's what we have in store for us when we study the life of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. And I don't want to make the series of classes all about him, but it's impossible not to mention him in this light, because you can't, you'd have to look a long time and very deeply to find other beings who evinced this kind of universality. Others were Shaivites, or they were Buddhists, or they were Christians, or they were this and that. There were isms attached to them. But Sri Ramakrishna was they said a person couldn't button his shirt and couldn't close a door. He was just wide open all the time, egoless, and didn't have any isms attached to him, and was always wide open to any religious suggestion or spiritual suggestion that came his way. He wanted to taste that. He wanted to know about it. And he was a quick study. So it's going to be difficult to forego mentioning him in this context. So this chart that I want to read from you first is actually has nothing to do with India. This is right out of the Western Dictionary. I looked under the word universal, and so I did a little modifying. I mean, I didn't modify the words at all, but I pulled out of several dictionaries different statements of universality and put them into one paragraph. Just see if it doesn't sound like something you've been looking for all your life. That is, that this will satisfy every criterion for religion, spirituality, and philosophy that you ever dreamed of or ever wanted to find. Universalism, a principle corresponding to reality and its essence, which declares that all beings will be saved based upon a truth that is comprehensively broad and versatile, existent and operative everywhere and under all conditions, that embraces the totality of mankind without limits or exceptions, regardless of religious differences, and that is easily adaptable or adjustable to meet the varied philosophical requirements of all of humanity. So putting together 2 or 3 definitions out of Western dictionaries, like Webster's and so forth, came up with this paragraph about universality. So it's there at the very core of our being, even here in Europe and America. We've thought about this. The word universal has never had a bad connotation applied to it. Like, say, Sanatana. And Sanatana has a bad connotation in India. There's some people who have taken that, made it into a cult, you see, and then say the Sanatana Dharma is the best, the Hindu Dharma is the best in the world. And then they've automatically narrowed themselves down and limited the scope of what it truly means. So that's why we have to look to this wider scope, see, in this wider interpretation of it. Now, Sri Ramakrishna said here, above that, quote, "I have practiced the disciplines of all paths, each for a few days. Otherwise, I would have had no peace of mind. I respect the Shaktas, the Vaishnavas, the Vedantists, and also the modern Brahmagyanis. Therefore, people of all sects come to me, and every one of them think that I belong to his school." So it'd be kind of hard put to go up to Sri Ramakrishna if you could have the boon to do that and say, "Well, are you a Hindu?" And he'd say, "Yes." "Are you Christian?" "Yes." "Are you a Jew?" "Yes." "Are you a Muslim?" "Yes." He'd have to answer yes to every one of them, because, and he would speak about the practices of each of those religions and the beauty of them and the illumined nature of their founders. And anyone talking to them at any time would think that, oh, this person is really a Muslim like me, or he's a Christian like me, because of his deep understanding of that particular religion. And that's a very disarming person there. Talk about the ego. The ego gets disarmed right away and falls into a state of shock when you come up to a person who's that wide and Catholic, if you want to use that word, in the sense of universality. Catholic means a wide open path that's universal. So we find that Sri Ramakrishna practiced all these paths then, and he's a good study for that. Now there's a story too that he tells about that, because he always illustrated all of this in stories. He says, "There was once a man who owned a dye tub. Such was its wonderful property that people would dye their clothes any color they desired by merely dipping them into it." You understand, there was this dye tub. People would bring the cloth to the dye master and say, "Dye my cloth yellow," and he'd dip it in and it would come out yellow. And the next person would step up and say, "Dye my cloth red." He'd dip it into the same vat of dye and it would come out red. So you understand, right? So whatever cloth they wanted to color, people would come up with the cloth and say, dye it different colors. He'd dip it in, and it would come out the color they wanted, but it was the same vat. Observing this unusual phenomena, one clever man approached the owner of the tub and said, "Sir, please dye my cloth the color of the dye in your tub." So this is a nice way of explaining the inexplicable. Universality is something that has not got to go around. It's actually got to go by through centuries and centuries. People have, a few illumined souls have talked about it, but on historical record, it wasn't until Sri Ramakrishna was born that we finally had someone not only speak about it, but begin to practice it, practice different religions, and begin to understand and evince this true nature of universality. Now, there are other ways of thinking, no doubt. You're going to have to become vast and broad of mind and heart, both, in order to become a universalist. For instance, you couldn't just become an eclecticist. Eclecticism might not cut it. Here's the definition of eclecticism in the dictionary: to select what appears to be best from a number of various doctrines or methods. But it doesn't mean that you've actually dug deep and practiced one of them. So you select a bunch of them and say, well, I accept that, I accept that, I accept that. So you become rather a person who digs a lot of shallow holes, but never digs that one deep hole to strike water. Ecumenism is also a nice word. The definition in the dictionary: of or relating to an entire body of churches, particularly of one religious tradition. Well, that's not going to satisfy the criterion for universality, which is all the traditions, see, all the religions. If it's just a bunch of traditions of one particular religion, those can't get along. It'd be very difficult to have a Methodist and a Lutheran and a Catholic and different paths in one particular religion, bring them all together and have them agree, like, say, with the Baptists. And same in India. It's going to be very hard to bring together the Shaivites and the Shaktas and the Ganapachas and the Vaishnavas and get them all to agree. Well, Sri Ramakrishna was the priest of the Kali temple in India when he was young, a young man. And Rani Rashmani had set up this temple along the riverside, Dakineshwar. She had a vision of Mother Kali when she sailed by it. It was just land. And the Divine Mother told her, build there. So she had millions of rupees, so she got her money together and purchased that land and built the Kali temple, Dakineshwar Kali temple it's called. And she was of such an open mind that she put 12 Shiva temples there, and then she put a Vaishnava temple there, and she put a Kali temple there to Mother Kali. So she was trying to bring Shaivism, Vaishnavism, and Shaktism together. And people wouldn't come in India. They wouldn't come. In fact, she couldn't find a priest. She couldn't find 3 priests that could get together, you see. So this is what I mean. India might as well be the source of universality, yet there she is in the 1800s, you see, in that particular age, unable to understand that all of these religions come from the same source. Even if a simple dye tub story is told to them, they can't get it, see. So it takes a being like Sri Ramakrishna to come and show people how to do that, which is what he did. Now, that's where, there are other things about this chart we could check into. There's fundamentalism, there's atheism, there's agnosticism, there's intellectualism, secularism, and materialism. These might as well be paths. They're mental perspectives that people take up. And at the break, you can come up and look at this if you want and read those definitions. They're all from the Western Dictionary. Everything on here is from our Western Dictionary. So it's very interesting to put them all in one place and look at them. Like, what is a fundamentalist? What's the difference between an atheist and an agnostic? There are differences, you see. And the live streaming audience can see this displayed at the break too. We won't go into it. I really want to move back to this original chart, which is titled after the series itself, and that's called Sanatana Dharma. So there you see this great earth meditator, like a great earth Buddha image back there. And he's meditating deep in nature. If you could see it closely, you could see that his arms and chest are stone mountains, and there are houses and lakes and rivers and snow at the base where he's sitting, and a great tower on his head. And all of this is a good image to sort of evince this India Sanatana Dharma. It offers itself very well for these different, many different, but non-exhaustive ways of listing the facets of India's Sanatana Dharma. There you see, just quickly on the left-hand side, Shaktism, that's Divine Mother worship. Vaishnavism, that's the worship of Vishnu, or Krishna, or Ram. Out of Vishnu have become these avatars like Ram and Krishna. So beings who have a particular penchant for that, or who have their ideal, they'll be Vaishnavas. They'll be in that sect called Vaishnavism. Or you might have the lovers of Shiva. You see, Lord Shiva, the god of wisdom. So that would be called Shaivism. Then Buddhism, of course, is there. That's out of India. Don't try and assign it other places. It moved, but its source is in India. And Ganapatya, of course, that's the elephant-headed god, Ganesha. So there are hundreds and thousands of followers of the elephant-headed god. In case you're thinking of laughing at the idea that there could be a being with an elephant-headed god, you better laugh out the other side of your face if you happen to be around these hundreds and thousands of devout followers of Lord Ganapati. Jainism is there. The Jains are extremely nonviolent. We've had some classes on them, and I've prepared a few charts for you that you could see how they practice extreme nonviolence. Worshippers of the sun, Saurism, or Surya. Surya is the name of the sun. Sometimes people do the namaskaram to Surya, you see, and do the salute to the sun every morning. I hope they know that that's not just, there's more than one sun out there. There's billions. And I hope they know that those billions of suns all come from a very fiery idea in the God, in the mind of God, the Mahat. That all of those are just fiery ideas, and they've managed to work themselves out into the physical universe and become physical suns. But their source is in the mind. There might as well be great ideas burning in the darkness of space. And there is a good meditation for your morning or afternoon. You could meditate on the sorrowless ocean of light, or you could meditate on the sun, which has no darkness around it. So there is darkness of Maya everywhere, but you're the sun, so it cannot get in, you see. So all of a sudden you're this blazing, bright, realized idea, you see, or truth. So the beings who worship Surya worship the god Surya, not the physical planet. And so you can see how deep this can go when you take words and find out the deeper meanings and where they can lead you. There's Sikhism, the Sikhs of India. Then you can see Advaita, the non-dualists. And here's the four yogas: Jnana, Karma, Bhakti, and Raja. That is the karma of the yoga of activity, the yoga of meditation, the yoga of wisdom, and the yoga of devotion. All of those four yogas, Swami Vivekananda wanted us to become advanced at in practice. Oh, for an ounce of practice, he said. We need to practice these yogas, not just be good at action and not good at meditation, you see, or just be good at book learning and study, but not be good at not having any devotion behind it. All of these have to be brought together and synthesized. Purna yoga, integral yoga, synthesis of yoga. There are books been written by souls who have this idea of bringing together these 4 yogas along with the 4 types of temperaments of the people who follow them. The active person will be good at karma yoga, hopefully, and the contemplative person good at meditation. The knowledgeable person will be good at the wisdom yoga, and the worshipper will be good at bhakti yoga. So all of these need to be brought together and synthesized. Now, down the middle here are 4 things: the forehead, the heart, the energy, and then the body. And this really comes from Swami Vivekananda's idea, which I summated here. I'll read it to you. This great immortal frame of Indian philosophy operates efficiently on 4 great powerhouses: Sankhya, its body; Yoga, its divine energy; Tantra, its loving heart; and Vedanta, its vast and Catholic mind. So here you get another good glance at Sanatana Dharma via Swami Vivekananda's taking up the 4 yogas. And there you see Vedanta, the mind, or the brain as it were, right there of the whole works. So you have this great meditative being. Tantra is heart right there at with his mudra of perfection. Then yoga, the energy, right there at the gut, as it were, where the prana is. You see, you have to get this energy. In yoga, they want you to get the prana awakened, because then you can do marvelous things with that prana. And then prana is connected to the breath, so they quite often have you breathe to get the prana recognized, so you know that you have prana. If you have the prana flowing, then you'll be aware all the time. You will never be sleepy, you'll never be lazy, you'll never be tired. And if you take that prana and raise it up, you'll never be restless. You can be controlled and peaceful and stay in one state of mind. Finally, down here at Samkhya is the body, because Samkhya has to do with 24 cosmic principles, right? 5 elements connected to the 5 active senses, connected to the 5 knowledge senses, that is tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, and smelling, connected to the 5 tanmatras, the subtle elements in your mind, connected to the 4-fold mind. That's Sankhya right there. One of the ancient systems of India that brought forth to you everything that the inner and outer world consists of. Once you come to know the inner and outer world, then you can transcend them both. Shankara has it very nice when he says, Om Drishyam Pratitam Pravilapayan San Matram Anandaganam Vibhavayam. Samhita Sambahir Antaram Vas, what we chanted earlier, too. So both of those chants, those slokas, evince this idea of taking what's outside and what's inside and rendering them into one indivisible state. In other words, everything originally is in one indivisible state. That's the meaning of Sanatana Dharma. Everything is one. In the end, everything is the mother, Sri Sharda Devi said. This is the simple truth, she said. So out of this oneness comes two-ness, and out of the two-ness comes manyness. That's basically as simple as you can put it. The innate oneness is consciousness without any shores, without any boundaries, without any names, without any forms. But there's a power that congeals it into forms. That can, the Shakti, the Divine Mother power, can congeal water into ice or into mist. You see, reduce it to liquid, into gas, and so forth. So this one water of consciousness, as it were, or this one air of consciousness can be confined into containers. Think of a clay pot, cap it off. There's air inside, right? And there's air outside. So think of a pot, or think of a jar of water. Immediately, if you do that, you'll think of the word in Sanskrit, upadi, or container. See? Upadi means if you have a container of water and you take that water and you bless the flowers, and everything is contained, you see, inside of something else. And in order to get back to oneness, you're going to have to take this practice of manyness and begin to show the conjunctions or the connections to it. Sit in front of the altar and take the water, add a drop of sacred water to it so the whole thing becomes sacred, pour it into the kosha, from the kosha take it, pour it on the flowers. Flowers are sitting on a plate, you offer that to the divine image at the altar. The image is there in a picture form, it's got a frame around it, the air is around that, space is around that, you see? You think air is all pervasive? It isn't. You see, it can be trapped inside a jar. But ether is all pervasive. So air sits inside of ether. And this is also what you do when you study the koshas, right? Upadi, kosha, pretty much the same thing. With kosha, it's living beings. You've got a body, that's the annamaya kosha. Then you've got energy in the body, that's the pranamaya kosha. Maya has made it look different, makes it look like prana is in the body, but the body is actually in the prana. That is, the body exists by prana, right? Man does not live by bread alone, lives by something else, Jesus said. So the body, the prana are the first two koshas, then the mind is inside of those two, and then the intellect's inside the mind, and inside, all four of those are inside the ego. So these are your five coverings, you see, containers. Consciousness is contained by these. This is called the Adara system in India. And I'm bringing it up because it's a Vedantic teaching, but much earlier than that, the Sankhya teaching was talking about the same thing in terms of air, earth, fire, water, and ether, locomotion, and procreation, and excretion, and so forth, and seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, and smelling, and audibility, tangibility, visibility, and all of these were connected, you see, from outer to the inner. Now they want you to take the outer, take it back into the inner, and end up with one state. See? This is your practice, your mental practice in these darshanas, Sanatana Darshan, Sanatana Dharma. This is your practice. Now, those four things then are very well evinced by this idea of Swami Vivekananda that's here. Now, along the right-hand side of the chart, you see here that I also put the non-dual truth as the crown, the cosmic mind there at the head, unmanifested prakriti at the throat, and manifested prakriti from the heart down. So, rather like the Kundalini system of 7 chakras, you'll find the origins to these things there. If you started from the bottom up, then everything from the heart down is going to be manifested prakriti. First, it's held in a state of abeyance as seeds. When, take your pick, either the father breathes on the water or the mother breathes on the water. It's the father in the Old Testament, it's the mother in the Rig Veda, breathes on the waters of existence, then everything gets manifested. See, the lake that was, or the ocean that was smooth and quiet, all of a sudden gets rippled, and forms start to appear off of it. So out of the lake of consciousness, forms start to appear. And that's going to be a move from unmanifested nature to manifested nature. And so India has always been proposing this as a part of the teachings of Sanatana Dharma, that everything's eternal. It's just a matter of whether it's unmanifested or manifested at any given time. That's all you need to know. If you knew that much, then when the manifested got taken back into the unmanifested, then you would not believe in death. You'd not believe in void. You'd not believe in a vacuum. You'd not believe in emptiness as the ultimate truth. You'd believe that everything returned to its source, that's all. And the great founder of, or you might say the great ideal of Vaishnavism, Sri Ramchandra himself said that. The disappearance or apparent death of all things, the destruction of all things, is simply a return to their source, he said. So when everything moves out of the manifested into the unmanifested, it gives up its crust, its outer form, drops that, and simply moves back to its source or its essence. Then it comes marching back out again, see, at the time of manifestation. So all you need to know is there's these two movements, manifested, unmanifested, manifested, back to unmanifested. And that's basically what Lord Kapila was talking here. When it was unmanifested, it was in the fourfold mind, the Mahat, right? And then out of that came mind, and then out of that intellect, mind, and out of that came the elements, subtle elements, and out of that came the gross elements. Or out of the mind came the knowledge senses, and then the active senses, you see. So depending on whether you're talking about consciousness or forms, everything marched out from this unmanifested state into manifested prakriti. So that's what's meant here by manifested and unmanifested prakriti. So if your consciousness is anywhere from the heart below, you're seeing worlds of name and form, and that's manifested nature. The seeds have sprouted. Seeds that produce mountains, seeds that produce forests, seeds that produce everything that's in nature. And when it gets drawn back in, if you go above the heart chakra, then everything gets drawn back toward the throat, you see, towards the third eye. If you're talking about centers, everything begins to shed its form, and it returns to its source. It become empty of form. And when it's empty of form, it's empty of troubles and problems. Like birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death happen there. But anywhere above that, they disappear. And only your true conscious, your pure conscious awareness exists here. And finally, all the way up to the tower of non-dual truth. So that's a quick explanation of this side of the chart. And then all of these basic, hard to call them cults and sects, because those words also don't have a very good connotation, but these various lineages and traditions that are there inside of India's Sanatana Dharma. Now over here is a box we never studied, but we're going to look at it today, finally. Some 35 paths in Sanatana Dharma that I came upon. Usually when we take up this chart, we only look at that much, and there's enough there to go on and on for a whole series, really. But I was thinking you might want to know about some of these perspectives that have come out of India. Probably to know that, you'd want to know that, as Swami Vivekananda said, now I want to tell you about my great discovery, that all of philosophy and religion is contained in the Vedanta. By the Vedanta, I mean non-dual, qualified non-dual, and dual. There are 3 steps and stages, and one comes after the other, he says. So this is his great discovery in this particular age, when he was born as Narendranath. He was Lord of Men, that name means, Narendranath. So Swami Vivekananda was, as he later became known, and was with us for only those 39 years or so, then he began to talk about, as he looked into the Sanatana Dharma of India again, and he began to pull out its facets and give them to the world. And he spent some years in America doing that too. Thank God he did for us. So he was talking about seers and pathways that were non-dual by nature and were qualified and then were dual also. You see, it's pretty much following this kind of a scene, a scenario. Anything that's dual is going to be pretty much from the heart down, because at the heart you have lover and beloved, and that's the first appearance of duality. When you have the throat, you have just oneness, you see. You're one with wisdom. And of course, when you get to the third eye, that becomes pronounced. There's just one consciousness there, and finally it's universal. So if you're looking at it in terms of what we've been talking about, then you see how these 3 steps in philosophy fit that. Manifested is dual. Unmanifested to cosmic mind would be qualified. And then tower of non-dual truth would be non-dual. So there are 3 steps of philosophy that the seers are talking about. And I've come across some more since then, but these are 35 paths in my studies of Sanatana Dharma of India that I fetched from the scriptures. And and listed. Now, you can see here, and I've put them in some sort of order. We might as well start at the top. It might seem a little bit cerebral, but I want to go through them really quickly with descriptions I have for them, like 1 or 2 sentence descriptions, so you can see just basically how many mental perspectives are packed into India's Sanatana Dharma. When you take something like that and put it next to the Western philosophers, they just pale to insignificance. This is real thinking here, thinking of the highest kind. India's always thought about it in terms of philosophy that was married to the heart. And when you marry the mind and heart together, then you get this real full picture of what existence, the nature of existence, is about. And yes, it's Sanatana, it's eternal, but it's also filled with wisdom. Now, you can see here the first of these, I'd say the first dozen are non-dualistic paths. I'm just going to take them as they come. Ajativada, it's the doctrine of non-evolution or no creation. Ajativada means, jati means birth, ajati, no birth. So these the non-dual philosophers who follow Ajativada think there was never any birth and there's never any death. You can find instance or evidence of this in the Bhagavad Gita if you read it. Sri Krishna said, there never was a time when I was born, there will never come a time when I'll die. See? I've always been in existence, I always will be in existence. And when he puts that on the battlefield, he says the same thing. Arjuna, you may go and destroy your enemies, because there was never a time when those princes were born, and there will never come a time when they die. You're just dispatching their bodies, their forms. And their forms will rise again. You'd have to know about manifested and unmanifested, wouldn't you, in order to make sense out of that? You're seeing, if you think on a battlefield, beings are getting killed, but Krishna says in the Gita, those who are being killed and those who are doing the killing, both of them are wrong. If they think they're being killed and they think they're doing the killing, they're both wrong, because death is non-existent. It's an illusion. It's simply going from manifested, unmanifested, and coming back again. Now, yes, there might be some pain in your death. And the pain is also illusory because it's over, you'll see in a few seconds. But there's a change going on, apparent change. Well, that's another path. I haven't gotten to it yet, but enough to say about Ajativada that this vada means path. So there are beings who follow the path of no creation, no destruction. This is the way they think. It's a non-dual path. Sri Krishna in the Gita would simply be somebody who would evince that path. And then there's Advaita Vada, the doctrine which states that Brahman is the only reality. There's Advaita here on the chart. So when they say Brahman is the only reality, so if you could understand that, then everything that came out of Brahman would also be reality. If you didn't understand that, then everything that came out of Brahman would be Maya. And there's paths called Mayavada, which also evince that perspective. Now, when you get into hearing all these paths, you're going to have to understand that there are so many perspectives there, and people are manning these perspectives. But when you see how open they are to each other's perspective, see, that they're entertaining these different possibilities, philosophically speaking, then you get this richness of universality beginning to come to the fore. You can then begin to understand what universality is and appreciate it, not before. So it's not a competition we're proposing here. It's paths that fall at 3 different steps and stages. We can borrow Vivekananda's borrowing of Jesus' way of saying it. That is, he says, if you pray to your Father in heaven, then you're a dualist. But if you say, I'm the vine and you're the branches, then you're a qualified non-dualist. But if you say, I and my Father are one, then you're a non-dualist. So Jesus was talking to the common people. He'd say, pray to your Father in heaven, because they were dualists. So they were following all of these paths, you see, towards the end. But if you came to Jesus and you saw that he was your Savior and you accepted him, then you were a qualified non-dualist. He's the vine, you're the branches, right? So you connect yourself to God through him. You get to the Father through the Son. That's qualified non-dualism. But if he went to his direct apostles, like Peter and so forth, and said, who do you think I am? And he said, you're the Lord. I and my Father are one. You are one with the Father. Then you're a non-dualist. You see, Jesus is the Lord in a human body. That's called, by the way, Avatarvada, which we haven't got to yet. But that is a path. So these three stages are very important to keep in mind. These first ones are very non-dual, like Atma Dristivada, the path that perceives all as Atman. Dristi means seer, Vada means path. So this seer is seeing the Atman. Like Holy Mother said, some people have accused me of being engaged in too much work. But what can I say? When I'm in work, then my mind is in the work. But I can take my Atman out and look at it any time I want, as easily as you could see a fruit in the palm of your hand. So she can put away the work and see her Atman. See? And then she'll put the Atman back away inside of her and then go do work, you see. So, Atma Dristivada, Dristi, seer, Atma. See, I see my Atman. I can see my true nature. I see myself, my true self, with a capital S, not my ego self. And that's my path. I practice seeing my Atman. That's pretty much what the Sanskrit means. I see my Atman, that's my path. See? Dvaita Advaita Vivartivada. That's a nice long one. That's a 10-syllable word. Dvaita Advaita Vivarta Vada. I'm sorry, Dvaita Advaita Vivarjita Vada. I left out one syllable. The view that reality is beyond oneness, two-ness, or multiplicity. So there you have people recently in the West, including Lex Hixon, our founder, used to say, no, Brahman isn't one. You have to say Brahman is not two. Because if you said Brahman was one, you'd be limiting that unlimited Brahman to oneness. So there are beings who have thought you cannot limit Brahman to oneness. So they would be practicing this path of Dvaita Advaita Vivarjitavada, the view that reality is beyond oneness, beyond two-ness, and beyond multiplicity. I'd say Sri Ramakrishna was a Dvaita Advaita Vivarjitavadist. Because he used to say quite often, God is with form, God is beyond form, and God is beyond both form and formlessness too. So he was just leaving the whole gate open all the time, wide open, no boundaries. And that's why he would say, when they called him a master, don't call me that, because it presumes that I've learned everything, that I've mastered everything. See? But basically, spirituality, truth is boundless. I want to be left free, like the truth, to experience the truth in its boundlessness. So that path brings a beautiful perspective. Now, Ekantavada is another path. It's monist path. Monism proposing that God is the sole reality. Shunyavada, the declaration that nothing exists based upon the 8 negations of Nagarjuna. That's a Buddhist path, non-dual path. What are the 8 negations? Nirodha, no elimination. No production, no destruction, no eternity, no unity, no manifoldness, no arriving, and no departing. Basically, sort of like takes the Ajativada path of no birth, no death, and goes beyond it. No arriving, no departing. The soul never comes, the soul never goes. Does it sound familiar? As Vivekananda used to say, where is the time when the soul will come, when all of time is in the soul? Where is the space which the soul will go to and come to when all the space is in the soul? So he was putting these beautiful ideas into English for us here in the West in the 1800s, after having known about such paths as Shunyatavada. He knew the Buddhist perspective of emptiness inside out. It's a very precious and powerful path, emptiness. We should all try it sometime. Just be empty of everything. Just give it all up. It's like the path of negation or path of renunciation. We'll feel weightless. See? Slough off all these weights and just feel free if we practice Shunyatavada. Now how about Sadrishya Parinamavada? Sadrishya, there's a seer there. Sadrishya. There is a seer present. And it's a Parinamavada. It's a view that states that all mutable things are not different in nature from their substratum. If you want a nice example of that, gold in an earring is how they say, or clay elephant, clay mouse. No matter what the size or what the look of the thing or what the apparent attribute is, it's all one substance. So gold in an earring, right? You can melt the earring, it just turns back to gold, or you can make ingots out of the gold or rings or jewelry, but it's all one substance. So basically that's a simple way of putting Sadrishya Parinamavada. It states that all mutable things are not different in nature from their substratum. So all one nature, one consciousness only. No matter how it looks, or how vast it might seem, or how minuscule it might be, it's all one substance. Consciousness, clay, gold, however you'd want to put that, metaphorically speaking. And I can see you all thinking. I can feel the vibration, you see. I mean, if we started into, you said, oh, this is going to be hard. But now you hear the explications, you see, and think, this is actually inspiring. Look at how many ways people have thought in India. How many paths they have, and we haven't even pierced the first few of them. How many perspectives you can take. Now, I'm presenting these not as competition to one another, although people may have used them. People may have taken one and thrown the rest out, you see, and one of them would have been enough to get them illumined, if they practiced it right. But what I'm saying here is that a great being like Sri Ramakrishna could man any one of these, take it up for a few days and realize its essence. And then he could make statements like I'm making here about each one of them. That he would really understand Shunyatavada or Sadrishya Parinamavada. These words, ajati here in the first path and aparinama here in this path, are the two pillars of non-duality in India. I've often said that. Ajati, no birth, no death, and aparinama, no change, no transformation. These are fast and tried and true laws in Indian philosophy. You cannot be an Indian philosopher and understand universality and profess the Sanatana Dharma if you don't know that death is an illusion, and so is birth, and so is life. Birth, life, and death are illusory. They don't happen. There's only eternal life. If you want to go to Jesus to understand that, then that should be enough for you. Why did he rescue fishermen off the river? Why did he forgive the sinners? Why did he do all these things? Because he knew that there was one consciousness and it was birthless and deathless and there was no change. No change means a parinama. Now here's a person who's caught in the illusion that change is real. See? Hundreds and thousands of people today watching TV, reading newspapers, and going about their daily jobs feel that change is real. In fact, they're looking forward to the next change, or they're fearing it. They don't want things to change. And so back and forth they go in this morass of what we call, conveniently, Maya. They don't know that time and space, birth and death, and all objects are eternal and at the same time do not go through transformations. The transformations are only outwardly. Again, if you go back to manifested prakriti, to unmanifested prakriti, you'd begin to see this. See, that everything that was once a seed sprouted, became something solid or liquid or gaseous or radiant, and then left that state and went back to formlessness again, or emptiness, fullness, emptiness, fullness, emptiness, fullness, emptiness, back and forth, you see. So if you know that this is happening, then you can see how it's probably one of the most subtle dualities that you could contemplate is change and non-change, or manifestation and non-manifestation. And it's by putting these two rocks together and smashing them together in your mind long enough, that you'll break them to smithereens and you'll go beyond. See? You'll get beyond manifestation and non-manifestation. You won't have to worry about being full and empty anymore. You'll just be the Atman, Atmadristi. See? You'll be practicing the eternal all the time. You'll understand what Advaita is, and you'll be in yoga. There's this Sarvatitavada, the path that declares the reality of all things and that truth is purely transcendental. So, everything is transcendental. Atita is the word. Sarva, everything. Atita, transcendental. Vada, path. I'm a person who thinks that everything is transcendental. If it appears not to be, that's just a ruse pulled over my eyes by Maya. But I must see beyond that. So these beings who practice this path, this Vada, are boldly declaring truth is purely transcendental. Everything exists in the truth. How about for those who have some sort of penchant for action? I think one of the most beautiful teachings of all 35 of these paths is that many of them have provision for people who are active. That you can be an active philosopher. You can be an active luminary. You can act while not acting. And Krishna mentions that in the Gita several times. Maybe have some sort of idealistic or maybe even naive notion that to become a sage or a seer, realized soul, you'd have to sit forever under a tree and not work, you see, or not act. But no, they have to get up eventually and go get some food. They have to go teach some people. They have to share what they know, what they learned under the tree. So this means they have to launch themselves into action. So India, knowing this, Sanatana Dharma knowing this, provided paths for this. Here's one of them. Kriya Advaitavada, the path of complete oneness even in action. So sort of like if the Zen Roshi stands up from his 8-hour Sazen meditation and walks across the floor, goes through the door, and that never happened out of oneness. He was always in oneness. He was oneness in meditation. He was also oneness in action. Now, if he wasn't practicing that, he'd stand up, walk across the floor, trip and fall and hit his head against the door still or something, you see. Then he's out of oneness. So he's thinking all the time of, meditating all the time of being in this one state. So it doesn't change simply when he acts. Holy Mother used to say that very nicely. Does God exist only when you close your eyes and cease to exist when you open them? Probably one of the best things you could put there under this path, Kriya Advaita Vada. Does God cease to exist when you open your eyes? And only exist when you have them closed in meditation? Oh, I'm going to go see God now. Bye. Hi, God. Okay, I'm going to open up. God's gone. No, it's not like that. That would be a dualistic path. So this path takes the path of action, karma yoga, and puts it together with the path of Raja Yoga, meditation, and declares them to be one. The synthesis of yoga. How about Dravya Advaita, the path that proposes unity of substance? Dravya is one of the 4 Shaktis. She produces this substance. So she'll produce matter, for instance, like, say, Pele does here on our volcano, right? She spouts out this fiery lava and turns into solid land. There's liquid going into solidity, you see. There's fire going into the cold slopes of the volcano at night. There's both of those have come out of her, you see. So she's producing substances all the time. The substances are heating and cooling. The substances are moving and becoming still. And they're changing constantly, you see. And all of that is Advaitic, you see. It's all based on a substratum. Like you'd say maybe the substratum would be the ocean that holds the island. And the island is spouting lava that's growing, solidified land. Acreage is being added onto our island every day, you see. So this is constant appearance and disappearance. So it's this Dravya Advaita. It's the producing of substances without anything really happening. Here's a path that is particular to our fold, Shakta Advaita Vada. Now I've got a page on it here instead of a sentence. So I took this one, and because it was so precious to our founder, Lex Hixon, we found it in India. We liked it so much that I had to study it deeper. But the main sentence here is, the path that proposes that all experience of existence is nothing less than pure consciousness, and sees Shakti and the possessor of Shakti as one and the same. So all of this is consciousness, and it's being held by this Divine Mother Shakti. See? And if I were to go further, we would use up the rest of this half trying to explain all of that. And that covers the Advaitic paths, or non-dual paths, right up to Shakta Advaita Vada. So those first 11 we have seen to be some 11 non-dual paths of Sanatana Dharma. We have time to take the qualified ones next. That starts with, and actually I have to make a little distinction here. There's a path called difference and non-difference, or beta-beta. So beta-beta, if you look in the Sanskrit dictionaries and you read that, it means that something can be the same and different at the same time. It can be one and not one at the same time. So difference and non-difference, they had to create a category for that. So you might call it to be sort of a fourth step of those three steps. Non-dualism, qualified non-dualism, and dualism. Somewhere tucked in there in the qualified non-dualism, between the non-dualism, the qualified non-dualism, is this difference and non-difference paths. Let me give you some examples. Beta-beta Vada, the path that declares that the soul is different from God, but is also one with God. I see people shaking their heads this way and people going like this. So that either hit you well or it didn't. Yeah. But when you think about it, it's probably a dilemma that all of us have shared. How can I be one with God when I'm so imperfect, you might say? In other words, you're still identifying with your body, mind, ego mechanism, and that's obviously full of fallacies and faults. It dies, it gets disease, it gets sick, it makes mistakes. So you can't, with any good conscience, say, I am God or I am Brahman, you see, which is what the great statements of India are trying to get you to understand. Yes, it does take realization. By the time you have that realization, then you can make that statement, and by that time you will have transcended all your limitations, you see. They will be, you might be able to fit them right back into these paths of Advaita Vada. But for now you can't do that, so you need a station to operate from. It's called difference and non-difference. I'm one with God, but I'm not. See? And I'm not proposing that just as a matter of convenience, so as a concession for you, because ultimately there is no doubt that the Advaitic paths are ultimate, consummate. One is follows into the other. So I'm taking you from the top down, you see, from Vedanta through Tantra to Yoga to Samkhya, or from the Tower of Truth to the cosmic mind of God, to unmanifested Prakriti as seeds and down into the earth. Manifested Prakriti, right down here to the 5 elements. So we're starting moving, our consciousness is moving down through these passes if we're going to encounter the earth pretty soon. And then we'll turn around, because everything prati sancharaha, prati sancharaha, Kapila said, everything has been projected from the cosmic mind in a chain of transitions, and that chain of transitions will reverse itself when it reaches the furthest edge, and it will come back into itself again. So this is a constant movement of transitions that's going on, inner to outer to inner to outer. That very thing has been called Kala Chakra, the wheel of time, or Samsara, the wheel of birth and death and ignorance. If you know you're on the merry-go-round, then it's no problem, but most people don't know. See, they've not studied the Dharma. I'd say that's why Christ and others probably went to India. Evidently, that happened, is that they wanted to acquaint themselves, or in Christ's case, reacquaint themselves with these great teachings and these great paths, because India had been teaching this from time out of mind. Let me go back to, oh, we don't have to go back anywhere. Here it is. Let me read the quote at the top. The eternal religion of the rishis has been in existence from time out of mind. The Sanatana Dharma contains all forms of worship. Worship of God with form, worship of the impersonal God as well. It contains all paths, paths of knowledge, paths of devotion, and so on. Other forms of religion and modern cults will remain only a few days and then disappear. The Sanatana Dharma declared by the rishis will alone endure. So it's been rolling on from time immemorial, and you can see why, because it never turned into a religion. If you notice, I didn't put Hinduism on this chart. Hinduism is an ism, see. And there's a lot of good to say about Hinduism, but there's also a lot of ancestor worship, there's a lot of don't touchism, there's a lot of problematic things in religion, in every religion, right? But if you take all of these paths and their followers and you put them together in a scope like this, all of a sudden you'll understand what religion with a capital R is, and why Swami Vivekananda wanted to bring it back to this world, because we had lost it. Religion had turned to a lowercase religion only, and it wasn't solving the problems. It wasn't giving us any way to increase our devotion for God, any way to know the truth, any way to practice meditation, or to do action without accruing any karma, you see. This is what India, if you look at the 4 yogas alone, this is what India is constantly giving us if we will take it and utilize it. So maybe that would be a good, we can recover our egos and our minds back during the break, after they've been slapped this way and that way, with all these different perspectives philosophically that we can entertain. And I think we should. I think we should think about them and write them down and see how many different beings, thousands and hundreds of thousands of beings, have manned themselves up with these kinds of perspectives and gone forward to gain illumination, or at least made substantial spiritual progress in any given lifetime. And what to speak of the grand inspiration that can come from taking the whole, see, and considering it in one big meditation. So here, with our time running out for the first half, we will break, and we'll come back to study some more of these difference in non-different paths. And in the meantime, you can walk around saying, I'm one with God, but I'm not. And I see you've all returned after some refreshment and a little bit of clearing of the mind of old concepts to make room for some of these new ideas that India is so inspirational. It really wants you to imbibe these and expand your mind. If there's ever a way to expand your mind, this would be one of the ways to do it. And you're doing it in the Dharma, especially in the Sanatana Dharma. And we're seeing in Sanatana Dharma how many paths and sects and cults and religions, if you will, and ways and vadas there are for us to consider. And we had gone through some of these non-dual ones. Ajativada, Advaitavada, Atmadrishtivada, Advaita Vivarjitavada, Ekantavada, Shunyavada, Sadrishya Parinamavada, Sarvatitavada, Kriya Advaitavada, Dravya Advaita, and Shakta Advaitavada. And we made our way that close to this Beta, Abeta, it's called, difference and non-difference. The mind's awareness gets a little bit more comfortable in these. But I'd say at the same time, it begins to lament a little bit those higher paths. That's the way I feel about it. These higher paths make so much sense once you've acclimatized yourself to Advaita. When you fall down into practice, which has to do with yoga, then there are certain criteria you're going to have to follow and satisfy. And some work to be done, and some, transformation to be undergone. But there was no transformation here, Aparinamavada. There was no transformation to deal with, though I'd say simultaneously then the mind gets more comfortable at these lower levels of philosophical understanding, but it begins to kind of rue or lament the fact that it left behind something very precious. You might call that a description of the world today, is that people are walking around all the time knowing that there's something beautiful and perfect and pure and sterling, something that's never disturbed by space and time, it's never made impure. Niranjan, it's eternally stainless and pure, and they're looking for it, they're looking to recover it, they're looking to get back to it, to return to it. And there are themes like that in all walks of life, and in music, and in poems, and the heart longs for that kind of thing. So that's why these non-dual paths are very wonderful to at least entertain in the mind, if not just take one up and practice it, and eventually be able to call yourself an Advaitist. We're seeing at the same time how Advaita can include bhakti, Advaita can include, of course, include wisdom, but it can even include action. Advaita, Kriya Advaitavada path and so forth. So all of this is possible, but it just takes a little bit of expansion, a little bit of shifting of consciousness, you might say. And how you shift gracefully, how you settle in after you shift. And like Mahamudra path of Tibetan Buddhism is like that. If consciousness shifts, then you have to shift with it and accommodate it. So that's what we're doing here when we take these ideas into the mind. They are powerful, and you'll find them to be challenging and also rejuvenating, strangely rejuvenating at the same time. If sometimes you just need to stir it up in there, you see, and then that thing settle again, and maybe that's a very positive thing that will happen. So we looked at the first of these different and non-different paths called Beta Abetavada. The soul is different than God, but also one with it. You might say it accommodates the fact that sometimes you can be in a state of oneness, and other times you can be in a state of two-ness. There's a famous story about Ram and Hanuman, the monkey god who loved him, and how Ram asked him one time, or maybe Lakshman asked him, "How do you feel about Ram?" And, "Well, I feel sometimes that when I dance with him like we're two and we're in ecstasy of two-ness, and other times I listen to him speak and I feel like I'm identifying with him and almost one with him. It's other times I feel like I am the same soul as him. We are the same soul. We are the same being. So these are shifts of consciousness that we make. Beta to a beta to a beta beta to a beta. Difference and then difference and non-difference and then no difference whatsoever. So very powerful ways of considering and moving the mind, maybe even moving it out of its old ways of thinking, musty, tired, outdated ways of thinking, and rejuvenating it, inspiring it anew, just to know how many paths there are. You can do the same in the bhakti path. There are like dozens really of moods that you can undertake. 5 main moods. You can practice being a servant of God. You can practice being the child of God. You can practice God being your best friend. You can practice God as being your lover, and you're the beloved and lover. So there are different ways in which you can do this in the devotional path. So you can see now how many ways they're also doing it philosophically. This next one, Bimba Pratibimbavada. Nice long Sanskrit word there. The view that the jiva is a reflection of Brahman, but is therefore identical with Brahman, since the reflection originates from the original. So, like, good idea, metaphor or analogy would be the reflection of the moon in a mud puddle. You see the reflection. That's definitely not the moon, because you stick your finger there, the ripples, you can see it's not the real moon, in case you were naive enough to think so, like a child. But then the moon does cause you, the reflection does cause you to look up and find the real source of it. So in that way you could say, with that analogy, that this path is explained simply like that. That the jiva, that is you, the individualized soul, the jiva is Shiva, but it doesn't realize that all the time, you see. So this individualized soul is a reflection of Brahman, but it is also identical with Brahman, since the reflection originates from the original, see. So you are a part of Brahman. This would be like the idea of, sometimes in the Upanishads you'll find these qualified non-dual teachings like, we are sparks off the fire. But if you said, we're all sparks off the fire, the Advaita said, no, we are the fire. So they would put that to rest right away, because a spark separating itself from the fire, it's made of the same intensity, of the same ingredient as the fire, but it has separated itself, and non-separation would be the mead, the main pillar of the Advaitist, and it wouldn't accept anything else. No separation possible, and no transformation possible, and no birth and death possible. So they're standing in this inviolable position of non-duality, but nonetheless some souls could use that as almost a concessionary measure. I'm a spark off the fire. In the same way, you have a path like that, difference and non-difference, that can help you. Because remember, these are steps you must take from dualist to a qualified non-dualist, and from that to a non-dualist. And these beta paths fall somewhere in between there. These are helping you return to your original position of oneness, or not two-ness, if you want to be careful with it. Now this next path is very Vedantic for most of us. I mean, it's one of the first Sanskrit words I ever learned was Vivarta. It's the Vivartavada. Basically, you could say it's phenomenalism, if you want to choose a word for it. That is, we know Vivarta means a false superimposition over something else. I have a brand new chart I just finished yesterday, and it's called Cutting Through the Clouds of False Superimposition. And you use Viveka for that. So what's happened when unmanifested turned into the manifested was that form came about. There were no form there. All of a sudden form came about. So when they look at that, they think form is a false superimposition over reality. Anytime you see form, it's not Brahman. So this will be like a rule of thumb for anyone having to seek enlightenment or to become illumined, to become fully realized, to realize the self, which is one with Brahman. I and my Father are one, would be to get beyond name and form. Because name and form stand as barriers. So what's being thrust when manifested Prakriti comes into being, whether it's at birth or whether it's back at the birth from the cosmic mind when all the worlds were made, projected by the cosmic mind, is name, form, time, space, and causation. Those are the 5 ingredients of Maya. And so Vivarta is all about that. It's false superimposition, and the Vedantist particularly wants to cut through that. Name is not real, form is not real, time, space not real, the world unreal. See? So they'll use that as the main criterion for getting beyond ignorance or delusion, no matter how slight it still might be. Any kind of attachment to form based in desire is going to have to be eradicated. They're going to be practicing Vivartavada. So it's where all manifestation is a superimposition over Brahman out of ignorance. Now that's an important part of it, out of ignorance. If no ignorance were there in the first place, then there would be no need for seeing difference, you see. It would always be one. You would look at anything and say that it's one with Brahman. So, put an illumined soul next to an unillumined soul, and the way they're seeing, one seeing with this eye of single vision and the other seeing with this eye of duality, or maybe worse, multiplicity, maybe worse, scattered mind, fragmented mind. See, but so the views are different, the abilities are different in perception. The one that has this single eye of vision is seeing everything as Brahman, and Vivartavada has sort of disappeared from the picture for that person. Oh, it's not a false superimposition, it's just an expression of Brahman. See? But they're not going to transgress any laws from the non-dual paths that they've understood. And they're going to make sure and know that name and form is still present and insinuating itself, but they've made the connection from name and form back to the mind, and from the mind to the cosmic mind, and from the cosmic mind then the connection will have to go back to Brahman. By the time you get to Brahman, formlessness is going to take over. Just like when you go to sleep tonight, you leave this realm and you dream. So you've taken all of this and you've put it into a dream form. And you'll come back to the waking state and all of this will be solid, and you'll go into the dream state and all that will be subtle, you see, dreamlike, wispy. But then you'll go to deep sleep and it'll all disappear. Dreaming and waking will disappear completely. So you're going into a formless state every night for several hours. And you're getting great reflection and refreshment and peace out of that deep sleep, and so that you can come back and deal with this world of dreaming and waking again. People who don't get deep sleep for a few hours turn into nervous wrecks. Sort of like people who don't meditate once in a while lose their peace of mind. And that's because they think this world of name and form is real. So you can see the efficacy for Vivartavada. It's not real. I'm cutting it away right now. And I'm going to make that strong effort as a practitioner to do that. Once I've done it, then we can let it all settle and I can say all is Brahman. But I can't say all is Brahman right now because out of ignorance, right? It's a manifestation. All manifestation is a superimposition over Brahman out of ignorance. Until my ignorance is gone, I'm not going to be able to give it up. That is, I'm not going to be able to give up the world, nor am I going to be able to give up the path of Vivarta that gets rid of the world for me. It's a very serious practice for them. Now, under Vivartavada, there's 3 headings. Vivarta Shristi, that means Brahman remains the same but brings about the appearance of change. That's one of the great rules of Mother India, is that Brahman is unchanging, but everything that comes from it is changing. See, when it spills into the realm of mind on down, then it's constantly in flux and changing. So that change will happen, but Brahman will remain the same, unchanging. So that's a very important, essential fact of Indian philosophy, Vivarta Shusti. And then there's Vivartopadana, a cause that does not undergo change in the least while it produces the effect. That is a fictitious material cause. So a snake and a rope would be what they would bring forth at that point. You've heard a lot about that in the Vedanta, that you thought you were walking in the twilight, you saw a rope and you superimposed the idea of snake over it. It was never a snake. It was your ignorance that did that. And when you look closer, you'll see your fear and your beating heart and your gasping breath was all about a fear for the snake, was all unfounded. It was not necessary that you ever went through it. So this is the idea of this Vivartopadana. The whole world is seeming like that. So you're superimposing everything unreal over Brahman. So that has to be reversed by the practice of Vivartavada. And C, Parinama Upadana, a cause that actually gets transformed into the effect. So if you put all three of those together, then you'll have this path of Vivartavada better explained. Now, the fourth of these different and non-different paths, Pratibimbavada, the view that the jiva is a reflection of Brahman in the realm of ignorance. So you are a reflection of that Brahman, and you happen to find yourself in the realm of ignorance. So that's a concessionary path in a way, difference and non-difference. You really are that Brahman, but you've projected a form into this realm of name and form, and you're carrying on as if you were a form, a jiva. You've separated yourself from the whole, and you're walking around in a realm of ignorance. See? So if you have a name for that, then of course you can rectify the situation. You can gain wisdom, you can study the Dharma and so forth. Pratibimbavada, that's called. That is, your jivahood is going to have to undergo a transformation, isn't it? Jiva must become Shiva. That's where my teacher always said that. Jiva is Shiva, so now it has to make a move towards the I and my Father are one station. Avataravada I mentioned earlier, the doctrine stating that God takes human form and descends into the world of name and form. That doesn't need any explanation, because we know that India believes in these, has hosted many of these avatars and is still doing so. From the non-dual position, these avatars will be one soul, coming in different times and different bodies and different forms with different agendas, all around the Dharma and spirituality, of course. But nonetheless, it will appear in different ages as one consciousness. Like I used to say, like with taking a scissors and cutting different forms out of a velvet cloth, or cookie cutters out of dough, you see. They're all made of the same thing, consciousness that is, but they take on different appearances. So Avataravada, or even souls who wait for Avatar to descend, souls who are poised to wait for the next manifestation of God so that they'll come and attend with God, that's called Ishvarakoti Vada. So you'll be a soul who's waiting on the next manifestation of God, like the 12 apostles of Jesus and the 16 direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna all came back with him, to enact this divine Leela with him. Vyavaharavada is the next one. The path of those who are free from worldly considerations and karma-producing work. So, find our founder, Lex Hixon, was probably an exemplar of that path. See, born in a well-to-do family, he married into another well-to-do family, so he had nothing to do. He was well-to-do with nothing to do. And he had nothing to do but just to pursue his spiritual path, and that he did by looking into different religions and interviewing different spiritual teachers, maybe some 300 or 400, 350 different interviews he did of spiritual teachers of all different religious traditions, as if he was just like following up on Sri Ramakrishna's appearance. And so you could say that avyavahara was his path. He had no worldly considerations left, and his actions didn't produce any karma for him. It's a beautiful path. Kartrivada, the path of those who are independent doers. So you could say two things about them. They've separated themselves from ordinary works, and they also can work on their own auspice. So they've been given free rein by God to do the work, as it were. Kartrivada. And so under that great auspice they can move and carry on their mission, as it were, on earth in the body. Mayavada, I mentioned that. Mayavada was a beautiful path, but there were some beings that took it up and distorted it, and had a great fall. It's also called Mityavada. Mitya means false, what is false, the path of seeing what is false. It's a theory which declares that the nature of the phenomenal world is illusory. So it's not at all kind to the world at all. It's an outright illusion, and therefore you give it up. So it's a very strong stroke of that sort of discrimination against name and form and time and space and so forth. And you'll practice that path and get rid of everything that's illusory, and the culmination of it will be in seeing the reality. You put the illusory aside, you'll see what's real. In the meantime, everything's dancing in front of reality and veiling it. Mayavada has a lot of similarities with Vivartavada. Vivartavada was practiced more by the Vedantins. Mayavada was practiced by the Buddhists a lot. But they have a lot of similarities in those paths. Speaking of the Buddhists, here's another Buddhist path, Sarvastivada. Early Hinayana Buddhist teaching that declares everything is. It's the radical pluralistic path that denies the existence of a self as substance or soul, and confirms the existence of momentary entities such as dharmas, which, though unmanifest at times, nevertheless exist from beginningless time and only change from a latent to a manifest state. In essence, all dharmas, past, present, and future, all exist simultaneously in one single dharma. Now, there's a good representation of India's Sanatana Dharma amongst the Buddhists. According to Sarvastivadins, there are 75 different dharmas, all real, like atoms that exist as separate units. They divide into two groups, the conditioned and the unconditioned. Among the unconditioned are space, apratista nirvana and pratista nirvana, remaining in the world as a bodhisattva or transcending the world of bodhisattvas. The conditioned dharmas are divided into four parts: form and matter, mental factors, psychological processes, and dharmas, which are neither form or consciousness and include such things as old age, vitality, attainment, lack of attainment, and impermanence. A nice long paragraph on that path because of its import and its particular association with Sanatana Dharma. Sarvastivada, it's the path of all this, all these dharmas being real. But at the same time, it denies this idea, the Buddhists, of an individual self or soul. There's no individual self or soul. In the same way you might call that amongst the Vedantists the denial of that the ego is real. There's no real individual self at all. It's just a vivarta, a false superposition of the ego over Brahman. So the self is declaring itself to be individualized, separate, and with its own separate source and existence, but It doesn't have anywhere to lay its head, as Christ said. It has to go back to this substratum or source. That's another beautiful path in difference and non-difference. Shadvaya is another one. It's a path of Jainism. It means really, it may be, it may not, it may be. Postulates the viewpoint of multiple simultaneously existing viewpoints of reality, each having their own place. The same reality can therefore be seen from different views, that each can be right according to their own outlook. Beautiful. Of course, you'll want to probably man yourself up with that one if you're studying Sanatana Dharma, or if you're interested in universality, all religions have the same essence or are true, and because then you can say it's like facets in a diamond, right? The diamond itself is most beautiful, but each facet can be studied and it doesn't change the diamond. And each facet also coexists with the other facets to make the diamond. So in that way, all of these paths, it's actually a very good representation of what we're looking at right now, that all of these are not conflicting or possibly even contrasting. They're all coalescing. They're all integrated. And you can take one up and practice one, and you probably should. Maybe you'll find out if you take one up, it's very similar to 3 or 4 others, so all of a sudden you're practicing 4 or 5 at the same time. And that's going to be according to your outlook, as it says here. At any given time and any given space with any given darshana, that will be a window into the house. And you can go and look at another view of the house from another window. Climb up a tree and climb on the roof and look through the window on the roof. And you're seeing different parts of the house. And they're all relevant views for seeing the house. Probably, if you were to look at through all the windows, you'd become a non-dualist. You'd see that it's all one house and so forth. But that's a very beautiful path. Shadvada. It may be that they're all giving you a good view, and they are simultaneously existing viewpoints. Well, this great being Vallabhacharya had this path called Shuddha Advaitavada. Shuddha means pure. So it means the relationship between the soul and the world is real rather than an apparition of Maya. The soul is seen as a subtle form of Brahman with only its bliss aspect veiled. That's why you don't see people dancing around in bliss all the time when they have to deal with this world that is too serious and too difficult and full of suffering, as Buddha and Holy Mother both said. This world is full of suffering. And you might hide out from it for a while, but it'll eventually find you, not only you, but also the view of how much suffering there is amongst humanity and animals and plants and people. But that aside for now, you're having this view that you are a subtle form of Brahman here. At the same time, your bliss aspect is veiled. The Ananda aspect of yourself is veiled. If you were to unveil that, then you would be like Sri Ramakrishna and have this bliss while in the body. It's such bliss that is cause him to forget his own body and go into samadhi. And you might say that that view of Vallabhacharya is that he, in order to get into that state, you would see through the idea of the world as an illusion. There are accounts on record, one of them our own teachers in Ramakrishna order, one of the direct disciples of Ramakrishna was about to pass away, and he came back out to consciousness, and he said, Brahman is real and the world is also real. So he had seen inside of himself. The classic statement would be, Brahman is real, the world is unreal. But he came out of this state of consciousness back into his body for a while, and one of the things he said was, the Brahman is real, the world is also real. So he had crossed through that barrier of illusion and see all of this as Brahman. So it'd be a good path to introduce yourself to this purity of outlook, which would lead you to a purely non-dual path. In the meantime, there's a shade of difference in there, isn't there? Satyabhedavada, the doctrine that states that up to the point that the soul reaches emancipation, it is different from the highest self, but when it reaches emancipation, it is non-different. Now this is a soul that's measured by time. You know, it's almost, when you man yourself up with a path like this, it's like saying, I know what will happen tomorrow. But I'm going to get initiated tomorrow. But it's not tomorrow yet, so you're not initiated yet, you see. So I'm going to be illuminated by the time I pass this body, I will be enlightened. But right now I'm not quite enlightened, but I will be enlightened, you see. So it's that kind of path that looks ahead, as it were, to this ultimate consummation of the soul's enlightenment. And in the meantime, it cannot call itself enlightened or emancipated yet because it's still bound, but it knows that it is one with Brahman. It's just that there's these veils still there. Like, say, your bliss aspect is being veiled, like the last path. But when that veil gets lifted, all of a sudden you'll see, and the truth will be revealed to you. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So, it's a lot of those different and non-different paths are about lifting these final veils. You put it that way. And those are veils that are kept in place for a certain reason, maybe even by you, yourself, or possibly by the Divine Mother. And we'll lift them at a certain time, and you'll get that revelation. Ekajivavada is the last one of these difference and non-difference paths. It proposes that there is really only one jiva in existence. I've often thought of that, is that all of us are one soul. So there's just one being here. Quite often I've explained that by saying, we're a garland around Mother Kali's neck, right? Although we seem different, we seem like different souls. We really, if you look at it, have the same bodies with the same constituents, blood and flesh and bone and eyes and ears. And we think pretty much the same thoughts, most of us, and go about the same actions. So even from that standpoint, you can say there's just really one jiva here. But from the standpoint of consciousness, which is the thread running through the pearls of this necklace, that's a given. All beings should accept that. And if they don't, then of course they're not candidates for the teachings of Sanatana Dharma and universality, which is probably why so many beings aren't entertaining that grand thought, you see. But it's okay. All beings will have their own perspective. Maybe it's a good time to read that from Vivekananda's letters. If you want to know what Vivekananda said in response to people about this beautiful Sanatana Dharma and about the very foundation or essence of universality, I can give it to you in a few paragraphs here. He says, "Let everything go on as it is, only take care that no form becomes necessary. Unity is variety. See that universality is not hampered in the least. Everything must be sacrificed, if necessary, for that one sentiment, universality. Mankind ought to be taught that religions are but the varied expressions of the religion, which is oneness, so that each may choose the path that suits him best." We preach neither social equality nor inequality, but that every being has the same rights and insist upon freedom of thought and action in every way. We reject none, neither theist, pantheist, monist, polytheist, agnostic, nor atheist. The only condition of being a disciple is modeling a character at once the broadest and most intense. Nor do we insist upon particular codes of morality and conduct, or character, or eating or drinking, except as far as it injures others. Whatever retards the onward progress or helps the downward fall is vice. Whatever helps in coming up and becoming harmonized is virtue. We leave everyone free to know, select, and follow whatever suits and helps. Thus the example, eating meat may help one, eating fruit another. Each is welcome to his own peculiarity, but has no right to criticize the conduct of others, because that would be, if followed by him, injure him, much less to insist that others should follow his way only. Thus, a wife may help some people in this progress, to others she may be a positive injury. But the unmarried man has no right to say that the married disciple is wrong, much less force his own ideal of morality upon his brother. We believe that every being is divine, is God. Every soul is a sun covered over with clouds of ignorance. The difference between soul and soul is due to the difference of density of these layers of clouds. We believe that this is the conscious or unconscious basis of all religions, and that this is the explanation of the whole history of human progress, either in the material, intellectual, or spiritual plane. The same spirit is manifesting through different planes. We believe that this is the very essence of the Vedas. We believe that it is the duty of every soul to treat, think of, and behave as such, i.e., as gods, and not hate or despair, or vilify or try to injure them by any manner or means. This is the duty of not only the sannyasin, but of all men and women. The soul has neither sex, nor caste, nor imperfection. We believe that nowhere in the Vedas, darshanas, Puranas, or Tantras, it is ever said that the soul has any sex, creed, or caste. Therefore, we agree with those who say, what has religion to do with social reforms? But they must also agree with us when we tell them that religion has no business to formulate social laws and insist upon the difference between things and beings, because its aim and end obliterates all such fictions and monstrosities. I could go on, if you like. That's basically a reading of Vivekananda's letter that he put to this fortunate person who received it about the Sanatana Dharma and about universality and about the basic tenets that are there. So if you want to be a universalist, if you want to raise yourself up to this great ideal of Sanatana Dharma, then there's your credo. So you can follow that word for word. Swamiji insists upon that. And again, this is rare. Where have you heard anything like that? You usually hear people pontificating or supporting their own cause only, or their own religion, on their own pedestal, on their own podium. But he takes it away from all that and launches us into this grand thought, which he thinks is the essence of the Vedas when you read them. I was studying the Rig Veda just the last couple of days and looking at particularly the verses on hymns of creation with Divine Mother. Beautiful, beautiful. I'm memorizing a few of them, so I'll recite them for you in the future. But the Vedas are full of this kind of universal idea. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. That's basically the oldest of all universal statements in any scripture, and probably rare in itself, even amongst the Vedas, which means there are many paths and they all lead to the same goal. Basically how you could put that. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. One truth, ekam sat, reached by many, many avenues or directions. And that's why I started off chanting this morning about that. That one singular divinity they call by many names, the friend of the gods, and all-pervasive ethers, and the winged carrier of consciousness, the fire of yoga, the devourer of death. All of these different beings are gods, who are one with Brahman. Just like he's saying here, we're saying here in this path, that there's really one jiva in existence. We might as well start looking at ourselves as that, in conjunction with all other apparent jivas that seem different to us. So if difference and non-difference is the aid we're getting here with this set of 13, this set of paths that we just looked at. 13 of them. So now we've looked at 11 paths of non-duality, 13 paths of beta, difference and non-difference. Let's look at 9 qualified paths now. Qualified non-dualism. Remember, I'm the vine, you're the branches, as Jesus said to. So this is a path, qualified non-dualism, that every teacher has to take on, because you cannot describe Brahman through words, no matter how beautiful the words might be. That's why I just chanted, where speech and mind both recoil, being unable to understand it, that Brahman, see, they recoil from that. So if you're at this non-dual level, like Buddha coming out from his nirvana, he couldn't speak. Jesus in the wilderness couldn't speak. So he's gone beyond words, even the most beautiful of words, even the finest of philosophy, he's gone beyond. Even the Dharma, he's gone beyond. But if you're going to want to try and explain the Dharma to destroy the ignorance or misconceptions or confusions or limited understandings of beings, you'll have to come down to the qualified path to do it. So it's a very important path. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna, it was his favorite. He loved qualified non-dualism. Almost all the teachings he gave in the Gospel, which is a very thick book, 1,000 pages or more, are coming from the qualified non-dual level. So here are some of them. Adhikaravada, upholding the doctrine that there is a distinct course of discipline for each aspirant according to individual capacity. So each being will choose that path that was best suited, right? We just read that, for him or her. And that's adhikara, means qualification. There's a chart, of course, with Vivekananda on it, which I've placed all those qualifications that are necessary that he talked about. And it's about adhikara. You must qualify yourself. Qualification is king, I think I called that chart. So in order to understand a lot of what's going on here, you need to put in the work mentally and philosophically, intellectually, to understand this. This is why the Jnana Yoga path is the quickest way to illumination. Quickest way, one lifetime way. Because you will be able to take a sword and cut away the clouds of false superimposition with it. And you're not going to get that sword very soon with these other ways. You're getting right to the root of what's bothering you, your own limitations. Call it ignorance, if you will. It sounds a little bit rude and slap to the face, but when India says ignorance, they mean avidya. Lack of knowledge of your true nature as Atman. That's all ignorance is. Once you know your true nature is Atman, all ignorance goes away like clouds under the sun, like fog, and you immediately make contact with yourself again and you feel balanced and peaceful. And maybe even that curtain of bliss that will rise, and it'll be like Sri Ramakrishna was. Nothing special about him. Just a true human being. Abhasavada. Well, we know words like Vivarta and Abhasa are false superimposition words. So it says here, the doctrine stating that all of creation is a reflection over Brahman. So that's pretty much straight to the point. We got it related to us in different ways with Vivartavada and so forth, but here it just puts it straight out. All of creation is a veil over Brahman. That is name and form, time and space, matter, all a veil. And If it goes away for you in deep sleep, then and it should go away for you at the time of death, it should go away for you at the time of deep meditation, then you'll see through it. But in the meantime, when you come back to it, you'll come back across the curtain of nescience, and you'll be this side of the curtain of nescience. The light will be on the other side. You visited it in meditation, you saw it in dream, in deep sleep maybe, you had a vision of it in your waking state, but not until you crossed that curtain of nescience did you see it as a fact. At that time you were one with it, you see. But then, because of your silver thread connects you back to this body, you came back to the body and you're on this side of the curtain of nescience and you cannot see anymore. If you can remember what you saw, then you're probably in a difference and non-difference path at that time, you see, right? I'm not one with God, but I am. See, right? Does it sound familiar? You see how all of these paths explain every conundrum your mind ever fell into. Also explain all the higher thoughts that you've had, that you've wondered about, right? Gee, could that be true? Could that be real? Did I see that? Do I understand that correctly? That's a great thought. I wonder if it's right. All those things get explained and have been explained by this footfalls of these rishis that have come from time out of mind, proposing all of this and living it. And so just giving you, in 3 hours here, just a short little taste or a slim little view of what's in India Sanatana Dharma that causes a person to dedicate his or her life to it every lifetime. It's not, don't think of anything but that anymore, you see. Like Sister Nivedita, whose 150th centenary it is next year, I guess. Vivekananda Nivedita means Naivedyam. He made an offering of her to God. This English woman, or was she Irish or Scottish or something? But anyway, he made an offering of her, you see, on the very altar of God, and she went to India and gave up her whole life and gave her life to India because she saw some of this. And it really intrigued her. Giving your whole life to God, where can you do that? Very rare. Especially when you have something that isn't an ism or isn't a religion. It's not limited like Hinduism or like fundamentalist Christianity that we've been raised in. You see some of us. All of a sudden you see the breadth, depth, and height of this, philosophically speaking, and it inspires you, causes you to dedicate yourself, and causes you to think about it all the time. Well, that's what these paths really are about. Avacheda Vada, doctrine that soul is the ultimate self, but limited by adjuncts. Your soul is Brahman, but it's just being limited by these adjuncts. See? Intellect, thoughts, karmas, these are limiting adjuncts. And we're studying the Adhyatma Upanishad, I said at the beginning of class, in Portland now. And some thousands, 1,000 viewers have seen it and so forth, and beginning to look at it. And that Upanishad really has a lot about limiting adjuncts in it. I think the very first word in it is Vivarta. So if you were to put all that together with these 3 or 4 levels of philosophy that we're talking about here, you can see how the consciousness can shift through them. So you look at them with your basic mind, you say, which one of those am I? You see. But then you look at it and you, with more wherewithal, and you say, I'm moving through all of those. They're like, there may be 3 steps, but there are many stages to each step. So these paths are very revelatory in that way. Arambhavada sounds like a motorcycle starting up. Arambhavada, the doctrine of the creation of the world by Ishvara, or a creative agency which posits a beginning or origination. This is really Nyaya philosophy. We haven't studied Nyaya a lot, but it's one of the 6 darshanas. And really is their idea in early times with this philosophy in India was that Ishvara created the worlds. Now it's not going to hold water really well for non-dual way of thinking. There is no creation, there. And even if you come down a little bit from that, well, okay, I'm going to allow that there's a projection, but there's not a creation. From cosmic mind, the Trinity will project the worlds out of their minds. All of this is made of thought. It's not too far a jump for us to understand that. The picture is a thought in my mind, the house was a thought in my mind, the trees are thoughts in my mind. And those are held back in seeds when I leave my mind, like called deep sleep or death. You see, and I'll bring them all back and plant them again and water them when I want to come back out into the world. So the whole universe is the mind. What's really sort of being suggested here is that everything is a manifestation of mind. So here, we would probably want to sing something that we often sing when we sing Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara, Guru Deva Param Brahma, Asmai Shri Gurave Namaha, Asmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So Guru, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, you see, the Trinity, is basically what they're calling Ishvara here. Ishvara form, or Ishvari, if you want to, if you prefer Divine Mother as your Ishtam, Divine Mother of the universe. Out of her came all of this, you see. So it's a qualified path. You look at it one way and you say, nothing comes and nothing goes. That's what the highest truth tells us. The world is unreal. It's false superposition over Brahman, and on, you see. But then you look at it another way and you say, yes, but it's real as long as I see it. See all these different paths we've already gone through. You can look back at them now all of a sudden and say, well, yeah, it's up to the time when I get enlightened. I'm not enlightened yet, so I have to see it as real. But when I get unreal, but when I get that enlightenment, I'll see it as being unreal. So you're making all sorts of concessions for your mind and its levels of consciousness. And you're shifting, you're getting good, you're getting adept at shifting through them, manning different stations. See? Like going to your summer home and then your winter home. And then it's a little cold here right now because there's no form and there's no name, so I don't have any clothes and I don't have a fire. And now I'll go to the countryside of duality and bask in the sun of dualism. And so, basically your consciousness is shifting and able to shift through different positions. And I think that's really the real point of this. Again, not a contest or a competition or something. It's really just showing how, on one level, different beings have come and founded these paths. These are each great thoughts. But even deeper than that, they've founded them and let them go and gone on to another one. And they've realized that as they do this, they're changing levels. And consciousness has the ability to do that until it tires of change. And it just wants to find one and stay there. So, Aram Bhavada. The doctrine that the creation of the world by Ishvara, or a creative agency, which posits a beginning or an origination. Back to the non-dual path of Parinamavada, there is no origin to anything. Study Gaudapada's Karika, non-origination is his main teaching. If you fall into the idea of origination, then you're going to think duality and worlds and suffering and illusions and all sorts of things are real. So he never goes there. He will not go down there. But come back to this path and all of a sudden say, it posits a beginning or an origination. If you looked about that if you looked at that, as Krishna says in the Gita, and he is this beautiful Ishvara form that we were just singing about, you could see how there could be an origination and then a non-origination and then another origination and non-origination, because everything's going in cycles. So in order for you to get beyond cycles, you're going to have to see how many cycles there are inside of cycles and make room for them. Because otherwise, when you get to the non-originated point, you're not providing for the cycles that you went through to get to the non-origination, you see. So, and it's fine for you if you're a realized soul, but it's not fine for others who are not realized yet, you see. So that's why I'm talking about concessionary ways and means here, philosophically speaking. Parinamavada, now that's directly in contrast to Aparinamavada. Doctrine of transformation that declares that Brahman transforms a portion of itself into the universe and living beings. That's Ramanuja, to a T. So we have Shankara proposing the non-dual paths, Ramanuja proposing the qualified non-dual paths, and Madhva proposes the dualistic paths. And all three of those are beautiful by way of their explication and description. They're steps that you can go to. So they don't need to be looked at in terms of competition, like one's higher than the other or lower than the other. That's not really the point. But you can see here that Brahman, in the idea of Ramanuja, is that Brahman takes a portion of itself and transforms that into the worlds of name and form, but keeps a portion of the greater portion of itself back away from them. So it's an interesting way of thinking. The Advaitists would say Brahman doesn't transform at all. It's entirely real. All of that's unreal. Why would Brahman want to take a portion of itself and create the worlds? You see, the worlds are unreal. So there you have this. If you find yourself in a body with a mind and an intellect, then what are you going to do? Buddhas cha jale. You're going to have to dissolve everything like bubbles back into water. See? Right? Famous chant, right? So what does the yogi do when he's granted this mind? So like everyone else has a mind, so the yogi gets a mind too when he comes here. What does he do with his, and what do they do with theirs? Well, he takes everything here and dissolves everything like bubbles back into water. He does that every day. At the end of every day, all of this goes back into his mind. What do other people's do? Fret, worry, fear, doubt, plan, hope, fear, plan, hope, fear, plan, hope, fear, plan, hope, fear. They never dissolve it back to its source again. So you can see why a path like this could have a lot of validity for a person in their practitioner phase. At least you could say so. Atma Nivedanavada. There's Nivedana. There's that name. This is Nivedana, the way of complete surrender of the self to God. So you make an offering of yourself to God. Naivedyam would be the Sanskrit word. So that's a path that's qualified non-dual. You might even call that almost dualistic, because why do I have to surrender myself to God when I am God? See, the dualist would say, right? But you're not in that particular line of thinking yet, or you're not in that particular level of capacity, like this other path said. Depending on your capacity, these paths will be possible or not. So if you're not in that capacity yet for non-duality, or you're not in the mood for it, then all of a sudden you say, well, I think I'll practice this offering of myself into God. And the consciousness that's in a body has been delimited by Maya, and it has to be admitted. The consciousness may be beyond the body, but even Sri Ramakrishna had to come back into a body and then leave the body, come back into a body. So as long as you've taken a birth, you have this prarabdha karma that you have to deal with, the karma of taking on a body. Even if you have no karmas from the past and you have no karmas in the future, you do have this karma of the body right now, and you've accepted it, and you're in it. The whole art of it is just not to make any karma while you're there. Kartrivada and some of these other paths, you don't have any worldly concerns anymore, and you don't have any karmas to pay. So there's your state of non-duality and duality, difference and non-difference. See? And you can hold that for as long as the body takes breath. And then as soon as the body is not breathing anymore, well, I'm enlightened again. Vivekananda was in India after his great triumph in America, and somebody stood up, a Brahmin Pundit stood up in the audience and said, well, why don't you just tell us once and for all, are you an Advaitist or are you a Dvaitist? Because Vivekananda was talking all over the spectrum all the time, teaching all over the spectrum. That's the problem with Avatar. He'll work with the fallen and lowly ones. No one else will do that. See, he'll work with the highest saints and seers. Nobody else can do that. See, so he gets a bad rap, as we say nowadays. See, nobody understands him, her. See, so especially while they're in the body. Sometimes after the body's gone, then, oh, now I can understand you a bit. See. But there's that problem with that great soul. See, can be difficult to understand. So
what did Swamiji say?
Oh yes, thank you. Yeah, so some pundit stood up and said, well, tell us once and for all, are you a non-dualist or a dualist? And Swamiji said, as long as I'm in this body, I'm a dualist. As soon as I leave it, I'm a non-dualist. Well, there's one of your paths right there. See, a lot of what he said, he got some of what he said from the Buddhist paths, others from some of these difference and non-difference paths. He was making concessions for us because he knew we would hear Tat Tvamasi, or we'd hear Aham Brahmasmi, you are Brahman, and we'd make a mess out of it. Sri Ramakrishna had already told him, you do not teach the householders Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. You cannot tell them that because they have families to raise, they have so many things, money to make, pets to coddle. You see, so many silly things they have to do. They can't be Brahman yet. Brahman doesn't do all that. Brahman doesn't do anything. It just is. It's beyond name and form. You see, you can't transgress the non-dual laws just because you're not in them and don't understand them yet. Neither can you, as Vivekananda said here so well, neither do you have any right to expect others to accept your way of thinking when they're not ready to do so yet, or not able to do so. So when you qualify yourself like that, you would speak all over the spectrum, you see. So he put that pundit in his place. He says, I'm a dualist as long as I'm in the body. As soon as I'm not in the body, I'm a non-dualist. And he used to say that in other ways too. Once he said, it may be that when I get out of this body, I'll feel extremely blissful the minute I leave it. But I will not stop working. I will come back and help into the body if I can, 1,000 times, if I can even help one soul out of Maya. So you know that he's still on the world scene. And his master too, Holy Mother said, Ramakrishna told me, she said, he'll be here for 300 more years after his death in the subtle body, helping souls get through Maya. So you can call on Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. And I mean, that's why sometimes we sing some of those beautiful songs about him that evince the Sanatana Dharma. Like sometimes we sing, Dharmahana Hara come to Dharma Karma Hara come Loka Dharma Chacharata Sarva Dharma Kovidam Dehi Gehi Sevya Nicha Pavarami Kampacham Namami Deva Deva Rama Krishna Vishwaram Namami Deva Deva Varnishram Vishwaram, which means basically to that one who checked the growth of evil and resurrected the path of Sanatana Dharma in its place, who, though a perfected master, needing nothing, practiced all religions as an example to humanity, whose holy presence will ever be worshipped by perfected beings and all those who seek truth. To that supremely ecstatic one, Sri Ramakrishna, I bow down in deep reverence. So beautiful there by Swami Virajananda. Song about Sri Ramakrishna. In that vein of both Avatarvada and Sanatana Dharma. Now we also have here Atma Nivedana. That's what we just took. The way of complete surrender of the self to God. Then there's Satkaryavada, the doctrine that states that the effect is inherent in the cause, but that it is only a change in the cause. So that gets philosophical, doesn't it? Satkaryavada. All effects are inherent in the cause. And a lot of people don't make that connection very often. Something happens and they don't know what the cause of it is. See? But the effect was inherent in the cause, so you have to trace it back to the cause in order to make sense out of what happened to you just now. Good, bad, or mixed, as the case may be. Karma is good, bad, and mixed. If you understand it, then the bad karma can be neutralized on the spot. If you don't make the connection, it tends to store up. And it'll come back to you at another time when you least expect it, and you can't make the association of what caused it. You see, it's a big problem for people in the world of karma, on the field of karma. So it needs to be dealt with a path like that. Satkaryavada, very good. Then there's Dristi Shrishtivada. This is actually one of my favorites. I think it's proposed basically by Lord Vashishta in Vashishta's Yoga. The view that the world is the outcome of the faculty of perception and that it is real as long as it appears. So it's very practical. It's real as long as I perceive it. It's in my perception to do so. But as soon as my perception is not cognizing anymore, at that point it's not real. Why would it be real? So one is able to deal with what one sees, tastes, touches, hears, and smells, and all those karmas we were just talking about and so forth, from the standpoint of it's real as long as I'm in it. All these happenings and actions too are real. But as soon as I don't perceive it anymore, it's not real. And of course you want to connect that probably with your deep sleep state. Waking and dreaming appears real to you, especially waking. Most people come out of dreaming and they say the dream wasn't real. And they don't know that actually the dream was where the waking state came from. So the dream is more real. But their consciousness isn't awakened enough to be in the dream state and see all that's there, all these seeds. And when it goes into deep sleep, no mind, no matter, never mind. See, there's no matter anymore, so it doesn't make no never mind to you in deep sleep. But then you come out of deep sleep and you don't remember what you experienced in deep sleep, which was nothing. Blissful nothing. See, but there is something there that you've missed out on. So you want to awaken your consciousness so that all states of these, you'll see all states of these consciousness. And then a path like Satkarya or Dristi Shrishtivada will become much more effective for you. Finally, in the last one, and we're running out of time, so we'll have to take up the dualistic paths next Sunday at the same time in the second class on India's Sanatana Dharma. The last one is Jnana Karma Samuchachaya Vada. States that only through a combination of knowledge and action can liberation be gained. You could probably find Sri Krishna speaking about that quite a bit in the Gita. In fact, the whole series of the first 6 chapters are set up like that. You do action first, he says, and then you get knowledge from that. And then from knowledge, you can get higher knowledge, and from higher knowledge, you can renounce action. So action must be done first. Arjuna even asks him that question, which is better, is to renounce or not. He says, not to renounce. Action first is better. You must do the action, learn how to do action with no karma accruing, and also have action lead to knowledge. Then when you get knowledge, then you can take knowledge and renounce action. Sannyas yoga. You can become a sannyasin. And so that whole series of first 6 chapters of the Gita are very big on that. So it's a great teaching by Sri Krishna. So jnana karma samuchaya vada. Only through a combination of knowledge and action can you get liberation. It's probably true for a greater percentage of humanity. Now what we want to see them doing is to actually get knowledge from action. Because the problem there is that they just keep acting. And you put that together with the path before that, Satyakarya and so forth, one of those paths, you find out that they're not getting the idea of cause and effect yet. They're not connecting the effect to the cause and seeing that it's inherent in the cause. If they could do that, then they could not cause any karma, any effects, you see. But it's just mindless the way people work and act. And not only that, philosophically mindless, there's another problem. They're doing it all for money, for gain, for greed, for fame. When these things get mixed in, then, throw philosophy out the window completely, which is pretty much what happened to the West already. I mean, with all the argumentation and debate and vying for positions that are going on, but where's the truth? So jnana robbed of philosophy and bhakti robbed of true religion. See, this is kind of what we're going through here. Then karma gets robbed by this very thing, you see. It doesn't have knowledge to inform it, because the actions you're doing are not getting wisdom. And then you can't meditate. See? The 4 yogas diffused. See? They're not working anymore. See? And what to speak of integrating them, each in their own place are not able to work because the other 3 are not working for them. So we need to rectify that condition, and one of the ways we can do that, probably swiftest and most effective, will be to understand some of these great perspectives that India has given us and is still giving us today, with a fresh rejuvenation of it from Swami Vivekananda, who came right to our very shores in 1893 and wanted us to qualify ourselves. Adi Chara Vada. We need to take the path of qualifying ourselves. Hear this, think about it, realize it. That's always what India's been about. Shruti Yukti Anubhava, it's called. Or Shravana, Manana, and Nidijasana. Hear it, roll it over in your mind, and realize the truth of it. Then you can go forward and act in the world without karma. So here, with our time all used up, then we will end with a chant and meet next Sunday for the dualistic paths, and we will have covered this beautiful chart on India's Sanatana Dharma, and we can take up some more teachings in it. Om Sato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamaya Mritchor Ma Amritam Gamaya Abira Bira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshina Mukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. may peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.